And I was like, "Wow, I didn't know I was adopted." So
No, I didn't.
cool. Cool, cool. So I get home that afternoon or evening, and I told my mom, like, "Okay, so are we gonna talk about how I'm adopted?" And she was like, "What are you talking about?" And I was like, "Well, they said that, I'm black and dad's white, and so that means I'm adopted." And she was like, "Okay, well, no, you're not adopted, but," and I hadn't meant to have this conversation about race and ethnicity with you quite so early, but here we go, right?
Right.
And so she, being the kind of genius mother that she was, she knew that she could use television to
Mhm.
explain to me what being mixed race was.
So I am super excited today. I have two guests, not one, but two. I have Dr. Michelle Foss and I have Ashley Johnson with us, and they are the duo behind the TV Doc podcast. And I'm super excited to talk about how media impacts our wellness and so on and so forth. So
Yeah.
let's talk about how does the media, whether it is actual just like television shows and things, but the media landscape in general, how does that impact our overall well-being, especially now?
Yeah, for sure. So, television specifically. I mean, I love all media. I love film, I love music videos, I love scrolling and seeing videos that people put together, on social media, but television is where my heart is and kind of
Mhm.
always has been. And I call television the great storyteller, right?
Yeah.
It is so much of how we learn, how we socialize, how we um, therapize.
Mhm.
That's not even a word, but how we come to understand ourselves and how we relate to the world around us comes from television. And it's maybe a tiny bit sinister in a way in that we don't know that we are being taught and socialized by
Yeah.
television. People think of it as entertainment, right?
Mhm.
And so we think that we go to television or we go to any media because we need to escape or we need to just be entertained or we need to shut our brains off for the
Mhm.
moment, right?
Mhm.
But what happens is while we're doing that, we are learning all of these lessons. We are being told all of these amazing stories, and it is shaping how we feel about ourselves and how we feel about those around us and the world around us. Um, so, if you are even the tiniest bit conscious of that, right? If you're thinking about what stories you are being told and how this medium, this very powerful medium, is attempting to shape your life and your experience, then I think you can be a little more um, intentional with how what you choose and how you engage with television, right?
Yeah.
So it's in my case, I think everybody maybe has their feel good TV, the stuff that you go to when you want to feel happy, or if you feel like you need a good cry, you put on, you know, any
This is
number
us.
of I have yeah, exactly, exactly, yeah, if there's I have a whole list of tear jerkers, shows that I will put on when I know I need to just let that energy out. Um, if you enjoy the sense of anxiety, I have some shows that I could
Jesus.
prescribe you for that too. Where but it's the not if you enjoy anxiety, but, like, if you enjoy the release that comes
Mm.
after you've been, tensed up and stressed in the moment. Um, so, yeah, I mean, it's a lot of it is being conscious of what television is attempting to do
Mhm.
can improve your experience and prove kind of your overall, I think,
Yeah.
wellness. But it's also important to recognize that there are some things that could be a little less
Yeah.
rainbows and unicorns too as well. And you can protect yourself against those messages again with just a little bit more consciousness and intentionality.
Yeah. Ashley, I think you alluded to what your thesis is. What is your thesis in relation to media and wellness and things?
Yeah, if you could help me um, to fully explicate that sometime
Listen.
within the next 6 weeks, Cassandra.
Do you want this degree or no? Because you don't want
Yeah,
me doing
right?
anything, okay?
Listen, am accepting help. Um, at its core, I am exploring the idea that, I mean, to Michelle's point, that if you want to go to TV, there's a number of things that you can go to it for. But specifically, with some types of television, there are communities that go to certain kinds of television for the community.
Mhm,
And there's a television show right now called Daredevil, and it's on Disney Plus. And there's a whole fandom community right now that is watching the show that was originally on Netflix. The Marvel community is fascinated with the show, and a lot of folks came to it originally through comics, and then they watched it on Netflix, and then they've seen the character go through some of the MCU, and now they're watching it on Disney Plus. And there's this community on Reddit who talk about it, and then through podcasts. One of my favorite podcasters, Van Lathan, who I also listen to on his Higher Learning
mhm,
podcast, um, is a total nerd and has a podcast about like fandom. And so he has a podcast where he talks about Daredevil. And so there's that crossover. And
mhm.
so last night I watched Daredevil as I'm Dr. Foss, as I'm also working on research. And then I
I was
listened
like, "Oh, you was watching TV, where are you?"
and then
I'm
I
just kidding.
listened to the podcast, Van Lathan's podcast about Daredevil, and then I went on to Reddit threads to not only read the threads about what fans were talking about, but I'm in them too, to engage with
Mhm,
other fans about, particularly there's a Black woman character who has no depth. 0, she's had 8 lines the whole season, she has no depth. And to engage with other fans about what does this mean, and do we like this? Do we hate this? Like, but at least she's not a love interest. But I'm also not feeling lonely because I'm still exploring this idea of identity with people who, even though I don't know them, I still feel like I'm scratching this itch of who am I? How am I being represented in this world? There are other people who are arguing with me, but there's people who are arguing for me, and we're sort of building these relationships and analyzing television. I mean, there's layers. Okay,
mhm,
back to my thesis, but that's all part of it. It's the idea that even though last night I was in my apartment, there's a community. And so was I lonely? I don't think so.
mhm,
And so does that contribute to my sense of well-being? I think it does. And I've
mhm,
struggled with depression my whole life, and I'm not married. I don't live with anybody for most of my life. My siblings haven't lived near me. One of them does now. And so I have lived alone. But I realized over the last couple years that that doesn't mean I have to be lonely. And part
mhm,
of that is actually these fandom communities that have sort of been right here all along, accessible through television.
mhm,
Um, and that's accessible to all of us. And it doesn't mean you
mhm,
just have to like be a Star Wars nerd who's like watching, Andor, although you should because it's a really incredible show. But you can also engage with Van Lathan in the YouTube comments, and then you can watch the podcast, and then by the way, you can watch the podcast on YouTube, which is television,
mm.
because that's a thing.
Yeah.
Yeah,
You can watch YouTube.
yeah,
I watch YouTube on my TV, which
yeah,
is a whole thing. But so my thesis is sort of unpacking, in a world where so many of us are alone, we don't have to
mhm,
feel lonely. And in a world where television can be seen as a way that can reinforce loneliness, it actually doesn't have to. It can help us build bridges to form relationships with other people that don't have to be shallow relationships. We can still unpack identity and social well being and even social justice within these other cultures And then we can go out and meet up with folks who are also into these things and do so in fun ways,
Yeah.
with folks who are also having a great time. So that's a long answer that I hope will also be part of my defense in
Yeah.
the next 6 weeks when I hope to graduate.
You will graduate, like, there's
Thank
no
you.
hoping. It's gonna be done. It's gonna be done.
Yeah.
But one thing that you said, something that you said made me think about how I think because of the times that we're living in, a lot of us are looking for community, right?
Mhm.
And we know that community is the way through. And when we say that, at least I often think about community as being singular. But something about how you said what you said made me realize that no, we're all part of various communities,
Oh,
you
yes.
know? And that's so important. And about the loneliness piece, one of the things that I think about is as a kid, I think I was maybe like around 11 or so. We moved from my city that I was born and raised in, where I had a lot of like physical community. So I had aunties and cousins and
Mhm.
friends that had known me since I was born. There, we moved to the suburbs and it was just me. So it was a very isolating situation where, firstly, I was like the only, maybe it was two Black children in the whole school. And my mom was working a lot just to be able to afford this new neighborhood in the suburbs. So
Sure.
one of the things that I think about often is, how TV, like, saved me at that moment. For example, living single, like, whenever this theme song comes on, even today, 30 years later, I still get choked up because those were my aunties. I'm just like, "Okay, I come home to, like" the home is physically empty, it's just me in the house, my only child. Um, but, like, that theme song's like, okay, I can see people who look like me and, like yeah, it was like a we didn't have the internet at the time, but it was a feeling of like I'm physically alone and I do in a way feel lonely, but like this for 30 minutes, I feel like,
Yeah.
whoo, I'm okay. And I
Yeah.
think about people who may be physically isolated as well for various reasons. Having the show and then now the community that they can build from that show is really powerful. And I just didn't connect that. So thank you. So with that, I would love to know what were some of the shows that you guys liked watching as you were coming of age? Like, was there a show that, like, even now makes you feel a way when you think about it or if you see clips of it?
So, my go-to answer to this has to be Star Trek because it is the first show and so beautifully a show that I found when I was a very young person, and I it was still there all throughout my adulthood. Um, and what else? Maybe one other show can say that, and that's Saturday Night Live.
Mm.
And so that's an area that I haven't explored academically yet, but I stay tuned.
Mhm.
Um, but Star Trek, so, the deal with Star Trek and me, I wasn't a fan right out of the gate, but my mom was. My mom was a huge, huge Star Trek fan, and so I would watch it with her, and, so there was a day when I grew up in Oregon, for the most of my childhood, and kind of the same situation that you were talking about in the suburbs where there was one Black kid in school and it was me.
Mm.
And so, the way that, I found that part of my community was through television, and specifically, though, there was a day when, my dad, who was white, took me to school and I had 2 little friends who were waiting for me, and when I get out of the car, they were looking at me like, "Hmm," and I was like, What's going on?" And they were like, "Oh, well, we didn't know you were adopted." And I was like, "Wow, I didn't know I was adopted." So cool. Cool, cool. So I get home that afternoon or evening, and I told my mom, like, "Okay, so are we gonna talk about how I'm adopted?" And she was like, "What are you talking about?" And I was like, "Well, they said that, I'm Black and dad's white, and so that means I'm adopted." And she was like, "Okay, well, no, you're not adopted, but" and I hadn't meant to have this conversation about race and ethnicity with you quite so early, but here we go, right?
Right.
And so she being the kind of genius mother that she was, she knew that, she could use television to
Mhm.
explain to me what being mixed race was. And
Mhm.
so she was like, "Okay, well, let's talk about Star Trek." And I was like, "I thought we were talking about being adopted." But she was like, "No, no, no, stay with me. So, let's talk about Spock." And I was like, "Okay, Spock is awesome. What?" She was like, "Well, what is Spock?" And I was like, "He's the science officer." And she was like, "No, I mean, like, where is Spock from? Who are his people?" And I was like, "Oh, well, he's Vulcan." She was like, "Okay, but is he just Vulcan? Is that all?" And I was like, "Well, his mom is human. His mom is from Earth, but he's Vulcan." And she was like, "Okay, but if isn't he a little bit of what his dad is and a little bit of what his mom is?" And I was like, "Well, yeah, but there's no other Vulcans on the ship. And so when they see him, he just is different to them." And oh, I was like, "Wait a second." I was like, "Am I Spock?" And she was like, "Yeah, you're Spock." And I was like, "I'm Spock." I was like, "No, I totally get it." So I go to school the next day and I was like, "Listen, I am not adopted. I am Spock." So that didn't exactly make me new friends. They were like, "Okay, now you're like we were cool with you when we thought you were adopted, but now that you're weird." So right, exactly. They were like, "Never mind." Um, but so Star Trek is how I kind of saw myself and understood myself, that part of my identity.
The cell
That's how I kind
phone.
of yeah, it's all good.
The cell
Yeah.
phone.
So
Yeah. That's how I came
Oh,
to understand, that part of my identity.
mhm,
But as I grew, there were more and more examples because Star Trek has continued on with this theme of representing questions and
mhm,
content about race and ethnicity all along. But I would be remiss if I didn't mention A Different World,
mm,
because the idea of different world really shaped my understanding of what it meant to be Black and educated.
mhm,
And, so if we put those 2 worlds together, the different
mhm,
world and the Star Trek world or universe
mhm,
together, that's me. Pretty much
yeah,
everything you need to understand about me, you can learn either through Star Trek or different world.
yes,
Yeah.
yes, yes. Ashley.
I was a Nickelodeon kid. I was a Salute Your Shorts, um, through Doug. Um, I was just complete I mean, we watched a lot of TV growing up. I was, all that. I was like, you know, a just
Mhm.
all of it. I was a Clarissa Explains It All, and
Oh my
then
goodness.
just completely, completely all of it, and then through just whatever the zeitgeist was throughout whatever my formative years was. So then I was later like Friends, I was Family Matters, I was Step by Step, um, Fresh Prince, whatever it was, whatever the zeitgeist was. Seinfeld, I've seen every episode a number of times. Um, I know it. And then it's like for some reason my grandparents really got into Rachel Maddow. And so I've also spent like a lot of time in Rachel Maddow's earliest years on in her radio years and then on MSNBC, like really getting deep, deep, deep into the Rachel Maddow years. And so I just have this like really strange like intersection of pop culture and then like radical left um television. um, and so I just have all of these like deep cuts of just like the absolute like whitest of the white pop culture. Um, and didn't really I had never seen an episode of the Huxtables, as we shall
Okay,
call them,
Thank
okay,
you.
or
okay.
Living Single, because I too am of mixed race. And even though I spent quite a bit of time with my Black grandparents because they lived in a white neighborhood, I think one of their forms of, like, trying to provide us with, like, defense mechanisms was,
Mhm.
like, you are going to know everything you need to know to fit in with this
Mm.
group of people,
Mhm.
Mhm.
and instead
Yeah.
of, like, "So therefore we will teach everything," it was very much like, "So you will know what all of these kids know."
Mm.
And
Gotcha.
so we very much, like, you know, again, I could tell you any joke from Seinfeld. Not that didn't cross racial barriers.
Mhm.
But I really didn't get any of, you know, anything
Yeah.
else until I got to college. But
Yeah.
um yeah, my television was very limited to like a certain kind until later. And then I was like, oh, what is this other
Yeah.
rich texture?
Yeah.
Look at this.
I think when I think about myself as a kid, I didn't realize how much I was like in, I don't know if the word is rebelling, but because I was in an environment where I was othered
Mhm.
and I had to, like, I learned about things just, by proxy, right? Like white culture. When I was home, I'm just like, no, I am going to find the blackest, the most ethnic,
Yes.
whatever it is that I could find. So when you
Mhm.
mentioned Friends, I was like, I do not know Friends because Friends
Oh,
was so big. And I'm just like,
Yeah.
hold on. Like, how is it that these group of people are in New York City and ain't not now one of y'all black until like way later? And I was just like, I'm not watching this. Same thing with Seinfeld. Seinfeld was a big thing. And I'm just like, no, I refuse. Like, y'all can
never
have your
occurred to
jokes
me.
about it. For
Mm.
me, I think, I don't know. There was something about me as a kid that like I tuned so much out. And
Mhm.
also I think my upbringing also shaped it in a way because so my family were fundamental Christians. So Seventh Day Adventist is what I was raised. So that means you really want to try to tune media out and yada yada
Mhm.
yada. I didn't even have cable. Like, so you mentioned Clarissa explained it
Oh,
all. I only knew Clarissa because a
oh,
friend had Nickelodeon, and I
Yeah.
went to her house over the summer. I'm just like, "This is amazing. You have all the
oh. So I'm
things."
like,
What
you
have I
missed
been
out on
Oh
missing?
my goodness. I'm like, "Mom,
Pete
can
and
we
Salute
get
Your
some
Shorts.
cable?"
Okay.
Salute Your Shorts also, that same summer, we were watching that all,
Oh,
like,
yeah.
all the
So
time,
great.
but, like, I
Yes.
didn't know all that was, like, rare for
Rugrats.
me.
Yeah.
Rugrats also, I don't know how I learned about Rugrats. Maybe I think I was older when I should have aged out of Rugrats. I'm like, "Oh, this is it. Let me
It
tune
is
in."
it. Yeah, it is it.
You're a whole adult being like,
Yes.
"Oh, yeah."
What we watching? Yes. But I think also my, because of my upbringing where we did like, the thing that I remember from my childhood was we are in the world, but not of the world. So,
Mm.
all of the secular things, like, I really wasn't allowed to watch, though I would watch it anyway because I was literally by myself, so I could do what I want when I'm alone.
Right.
Um, but yeah, I just didn't learn a lot of things and until later on. And even still, when we talk about pop culture from, like, our, like, years of coming of age, I don't know what y'all talking about because
Yeah.
I was at church or
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
interesting because so much of my research about culture and about community is about getting the joke, is about the inside jokes.
Mhm.
And if you don't get the joke, it's like knowing the secret handshake.
Yes.
And so if the three of us walked into a room and I said, um, and I said something, and it
Mhm.
like I wouldn't be able to know, you know, Michelle from Cassandra, let's say if you were my people or not, based
Yeah.
on if I could tell if one of you knew it
Mhm.
or not,
Yeah.
because I knew, oh,
Yeah.
you watched that show.
Yeah.
Um, and um, and so that's within culture, within television culture,
Oh,
Yeah.
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 especially in fandom, there's gatekeeping. And so
Mm.
people are very protective over, like, oh, you don't know this about Star
Right.
Wars, or you don't know, this about Marvel, or you don't know this about when Michelle first really introduced me to Star Trek. She would keep saying, like, do you feel like a Trekkie? Do you feel like a Trekkie? I'm like, I won't even say the word because I don't want
She's
to
like, "I
step
don't
out
wanna
of
get it wrong.
line.
I don't wanna."
I don't want to step out of line. And we're both in the same sorority, and I feel like it's very similar. We're like, I don't want somebody even coming
Right.
close to like,
Mm-mm. No.
doing this. And so when she was like throwing up the spa thing, and I'm like, I would never. Now I feel more now that I've been like deep in the research, but it does feel within these fandom communities that you
Mhm.
get from not only, again, watching television, but from sharing the experiences from
Yes.
that shared love, and from that shared identity and that shared language that you pick up. And again, even when I said you two sociopaths and you two had that connection of like, we want to be in school forever, that
Yes.
Yep.
is community. That is something
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
2 share, you 2 are in that club that I'm not part of, and I don't wanna be that's fine. But that is then another layer of community that you 2 have, and it can be a
Mhm.
beautiful thing, but then
Mhm.
it can also be, now you 2 are in that club,
Yeah.
maybe I'm not in that club. There's just so many layers of how television creates groups,
Yep.
creates
Yeah.
outsiders and insiders, and it's just such a fascinating thing to study,
Yeah.
especially since it was such a huge part of our lives,
Mhm.
growing up, and it's such a huge part of your life even if you didn't have access, because
Mhm.
you aren't even aware of all the ways in which you aren't in on the
Yes. The
jokes because
jokes.
you just
Yep.
don't
Mhm.
know the things
Yep.
that are
Right.
being said that are like, "Oh, you got that?" Or like,
Yeah.
Yeah.
"No
Yeah.
soup for you." If I said to like, "Michelle, did you watch Seinfeld?"
I did.
Okay, I mean, if
See,
I
that one
said,
I know.
"Oh,
I
no
know
soup
Yeah.
for
that
you."
episode.
Because
Yes.
niche
Yes.
enough. That's not niche enough.
Yes, that
Okay.
one I know.
That one's so mainstream.
I
That's
know that
mainstream.
is
But if I said, Darmok and Jalad at Tanagra,
I don't know
oh,
what's going on.
so the proper response is Shaka when the walls fell.
Okay.
But that's okay. I mean, it's fine. So
not
listen,
familiar.
when Ashley, so I had been trying to get Ashley on Star Trek for, I don't think it's an exaggeration to say a decade, maybe more than that. And so I think we might be coming up on about 2 decades of about 20 years of me trying to get her into Star Trek. And so the day that she texted me and was like, "Okay, I watched it and I love it." I cried real tears. I
Aw.
really did because I was that it was so meaningful to me because of, this is someone who I care for very much, and now we can have
Have
that
that.
language. It's another layer to the relationship that I'm like,
Yeah.
finally, because one of the things that we haven't really talked about is that especially, certain fandoms, like Ashley said, they are gatekeepy, but not just about their content, but about who the
Mhm.
people are that can be
Mhm.
considered part of the community, part of the group, right? And so Star Trek is one of those that it makes no sense, right? Because the whole point of Star Trek is like infinite diversity and infinite combination. Um but there is a
Yeah.
majority
Mhm.
audience that feels like, yeah, we know that. We know that diversity, blah, 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 okay,
Mhm.
but this is ours. And
Yeah.
so the Trekkies of color, but especially Black Trekkies,
Mhm.
have felt ostracized from something that was supposed to be kind of for them for the beginning. So, um, when other people, especially other Black folks, get interested in Star Trek, I'm like, "Welcome, come, please, please have a seat, like, settle in. Are you hungry? Do you want any snacks? Um, like, can I bring you a blanket? Like, what do you need?" Um, so there's that kind of aspect of community building from the
Mhm.
inside on the fringes that's happening as well.
You said that so beautifully. Now I'm gonna dive into Star Trek with my kids. Like,
Well,
I
there's a
did not
certain
know.
one too, because there's
Oh.
also gatekeeping
Yeah.
within,
Oh.
because the one that I started with happens to be the series where there's a Black female captain.
correct.
So where should I start? Where's a good starting spot?
I actually approved of Discovery being the entry point for Ashley because it has a modern sensibility, right? This was a 2017 start,
Okay.
so it doesn't have the baggage
Mhm,
of a 1967 start or a 1987 start, right?
mhm,
Television is different now.
mhm,
And so the fact that the lead is a Black woman,
mhm.
that's important, that's significant. But also it's got kind of 2017 storytelling devices that I thought that she would kind of respond to.
Mhm.
But it also makes sense within the chronology of the story timeline. And I don't wanna say too much more about that because it's a little bit of a spoiler, but I think, just well, it depends how old the kids are.
So my oldest is 10.
So I don't know if Discovery is a great place to start for
Maybe a
that.
little violent.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
Okay.
So I would actually start you off with Star Trek Prodigy,
Okay.
Oh, what
which
is that?
w how dare you? Excuse me. So Star Trek Prodigy, I'm taken aback. I'm, like, clutching pearls over here. It is an again, a newer show, but it's animated, and it follows a group of not kids, but, like, teenagers,
Mhm.
young people, and they're having Star Trek adventures.
Okay.
So Prodigy.
Prodigy.
It's the
Okay.
one that started off on, Paramount Plus and
Mhm.
then moved to Netflix, so it's on Netflix now.
Okay.
Netflix
Okay.
essentially saved it. It was canceled.
Gotcha. Okay, okay,
And then
okay.
Netflix was like, "Wait, you mean we could get those nerd dollars?" Yeah.
Right.
This
Step in.
feels like a sound financial move. Yeah. Yeah, 'cause what Star Trek fans have demonstrated is that we are willing to pay for our content. We are.
But the reason I'm just like, "Oh, maybe I do want to, like, dive into Star Trek," is because to your point earlier about how media really shapes our own, like, consciousness, subconsciousness, and
Yeah.
I've become really not vigilant, but I've tried to be very intentional about what the kids are watching, and
Mhm.
I try to pay attention to what they're hearing,
Yes.
because my oldest is 10, and
Yeah.
I'm seeing so many, like, teens and older boys, like, consuming things that just really warp
Yes.
their realities, and
Yep.
I think it starts so early because he does consume a lot of YouTube, and I'm
Absolutely.
just like,
Yes.
"We don't like YouTube because" not for him quite yet, because it can go down starts off really innocent, and it can go down a rabbit hole that he has no
Yeah.
business being in and learning things that aren't real, you know?
Yeah. That's right. So, here's what I think that the trick is. So to be perfectly honest, I was watching and especially reading
Mhm.
things
Same,
that were before like, I should not have been reading
same.
Stephen King
Mhm,
as a little kid, but
mhm.
I was reading Pet
Same.
Sematary, I was reading all of the things because, I mean, I was a voracious reader. I
Mm,
wanted to read everything I could get my
mhm,
hands on, and somebody left a little paperback laying
mhm,
around, and I was like, "Oh, what's this?
mhm,
Okay, I'll check it out." And I was terrified, but also that led to a lifelong interest in horror and terror and,
mhm,
that kind of media. But anyway, so I was reading stuff that I shouldn't have been reading as a kid, shouldn't have been,
mhm.
and I was watching stuff that I shouldn't have been watching. But again, going back to like how I don't know how my mom could not have known that I would grow up to be this, right?
Mhm.
But she still understood enough about her kid that she knew how to kind of activate in me what was necessary so that I didn't end up a serial killer.
Right.
So she the most amazing thing that she did, which is the same thing that I'm trying to do with my daughter, is begin the encouragement of critical thinking
Yeah.
from jump, right?
Mhm,
So it's not necessarily the content that you're watching. Obviously, there's some of that, right?
mhm,
You have to kind of monitor the content. Um, but let's say, your kid does watch something that is, maybe rated
Mhm.
for a higher age,
Mhm.
that could still be okay if the criticism is going along with it, right?
Yeah.
So I would watch, um, I used to watch Dynasty with my mom, excuse me, like a
Same,
whole
same.
primetime soap with all of the like slap fights
Yes.
and the, you know,
Yes.
so we'd be watching and she'd be like, "Oh, well, why do you think that lady is so mad at the other lady?
Mhm.
What do you think she should apologize or, whatever?" And oh, well, this person's trying to build this company or do that. What do you think about that? And so she got me started being a critical consumer of what I was
Mm.
watching and reading and encouraging me to think about that and think about my relation to that content.
Yeah.
That made all the difference. And
Mm.
so she was raising a critical kid that grew up to be a whole critic.
Yeah. Yeah.
And which I think was like armor. I think it
Yeah.
protected me from a lot of the BS.
Yeah. For sure.
Yeah.
Ooh. Oh man, I don't want to like have the conversation derail to parenting. Before we wrap up, I would love to know what is next for you, Dr. Foss, as well as on the TV doctor. And Ashley, we know that you're in the trenches, that you're at the finish line, but I would love to
Yes.
know what you all have coming up down the pipeline for us.
Yeah. Well, so Ashley is going to finish her thesis. She will be
Period.
a Master of Arts. And hopefully, when that is done, we're leaving space for that to finish. But when that's done, Ashley is my co host, my second in command, my first officer, my Chadich. That's another Star Trek. That's Klingon for basically, my partner,
Mhm.
my homie, my good sis on the TV Doctor season 5. So we are so basically the
Mhm.
TV Doctor has been around for a couple of years, but then when Ashley said that she was watching Star Trek, I was like, "Oh, I think we have an opportunity here." And so I decided to make season 5 of the TV Doctor into this project where I am essentially the like seasoned from the cradle Star Trek fan, and she's this like newbie who is kind of interested in wanting to dip her toe in the Star Trek universe. And so season 5 of the TV Doctor is basically just us talking about Star Trek Discovery.
That's dope.
But once we got started doing it, it was like, "Oh, this might actually be a thing." So we decided to have a spinoff, which is apropos for television. So our spinoff podcast is going to be called Sick Bay, which is where they call that's what they call the medical center on a starship. It's called sick bay. So, on
Nice.
sick bay, we are going to be doing a lot of the same work that the TV doctor always has. We're still prescribing what you should be watching in order to deal with what's bugging you. We're also doing some analysis, some criticism of the Star Trek properties, and we're having a good time.
Nice.
We're having a
Exciting.
good time, and it still makes space for, in a similar vein to Be Well Sis, um, very real moments that
Yeah,
people and Black women face. Um, our first episode that we did together, and maybe you can drop a note in the section of this. For suicidal ideation conversation, but in our first episode together, it was sort of like, look, there's some things we're going to talk about, and we talked about how I'm a survivor of a suicide attempt because of struggles that I've had with major depression, and Michelle, through helping me over the last, we're not going to mention the number of years, sort of in and out of trying to finish school, and then through our shared love of fandom, and then this excitement over Star Trek and how we can find health and healing and meaning and community through television. um as a space where we have both found those things and then can maybe help other people find space for those things has just become a really exciting thing for both of us and something that we hope other people can find as well. So it's not something that is going to be this like very heavy, every episode is really heavy in that way, but we aren't going to shy away from issues like that.
That's right.
Things only have a stigma if you talk about them as if there's a stigma attached. And so they are
Yeah.
things that we're going to discuss, but those are themes that you see in fandom as well. Star Trek and Star Wars, and Marvel, all of these properties, the villains and the heroes, they go through issues that mimic things that we go through in real life. They
Nice.
don't come out of nowhere. They are
Yeah.
things that the creators and the illustrators that they are dealing with, and they, are splashed onto the page. And so those are the things that we like to pull from and that we like to talk about. And so we hope that you come join us in sick bay so that you can, come find some of the medicine that you need. And Michelle loves to sort of like prescribe the episodes, and I love to sort of like dig into the culture and the community. And between the two of us, we hope that you can, come with some curiosity and stay for the community.
Oh, I love it. I'm excited. I'm very, very excited. So, congrats to you all. Of course, I will have all of the information as to where you can watch and listen to the TV Doctor as well as Sick Bay. When will Sick Bay launch? Do we know yet?
What
Look,
it's
listen,
we're
I don't
waiting
know
on
if I
No
don't know if I've
problem.
mentioned
post
this,
thesis.
Cassandra. I don't
No
know if I
problem. No
mentioned
problem. No
this.
problem. No pressure. No problem.
I don't know if,
But we will have
but if you
information as
subscribe,
to where
if you
where the
subscribe to
folks
the
can
pod,
go
if you subscribe to the pod, it will show up when
when it's ready. Period.
When it's
Yes.
ready.
it will show up on whatever app you get your podcasts when it's published. Okay.
Yes, that part.
That's
So
what
I
it
will
will
have
do.
all that info down below in the show
It will
notes.
show up when we put it out there. Is what will
Ashley said, "Y'all not
happen.
gonna pressure me." I get it. I get
That's
it.
what
No,
will
we're not.
happen. Yeah, it will show up when we're ready. Okay.
Yes. When y'all are ready, when it's ready, all of the things. But thank you guys so much. I really, really appreciate this time. I really appreciate this conversation. I needed this. So thank you for your time. I really appreciate you guys. Thank you for listening to this episode of Be Well Sis. If you'd like to get in touch with us, there's a link in the show notes. Be Well Sis is hosted by me, Dr. Cassandre Dunbar, and produced by Edit Audio. Don't forget to hit follow so you never miss an episode. Until next time, be well, sis.